Welcome into Postgame Live on Channel BSR, the purple edition of Postgame Live on Channel BSR. I'm Zach Wilt from BaltimoreSportsReport.com, joined by Scott Magnus from Bird's Eye View. How's it going, Scott?
It is, well, it's going pretty poor so far today, I gotta admit.
The weather was beautiful. Both of our beloved sports teams were playing, and so far we're 50% sad with the Orioles game still going on. So.
Yeah, we do have some semblance of hope. The New York Yankees are losing right now 2-0 on Derek Jeter Day. In fact, I'm really disappointed that you didn't start out this episode was just saying it's Derek Jeter Day. This is a national holiday.
Yes,
Zach, okay?
no, I'm sorry. Yeah, I did see the headlines. You're absolutely right. Should we start over? Should we stop this and start over? I know people are watching live, but really, I mean, we dropped the ball on that.
No, I don't want to talk about the Yankees. Let's just get right to the Ravens and go through how amazing this game was for Baltimore sports fans.
Oh man, 23-16 loss in Week 1. The good news is, hey, they'll get right back at it in a few days. But 23-16 loss in Week 1. This was, to me, Scott, really a tale of two halves, with the Ravens looking absolutely dreadful in the first half, particularly on offense, and then kind of turning things around. Maybe the Bengals keeping them in it. I guess you could credit the defense for limiting the damage to field goals as opposed to touchdowns in the first half. I don't know. What was your instant reaction here to this loss?
You know, I'd love to get the defense some credit during that first half. You know, they did have a bend, not break attitude, but, you know, the Bengals also had a few silly plays. There was a lot of emphasis in that first half with Dalton doing a lot of QB reads and trying to pick up first downs, and also that, you know, play in the red zone where they're on the 3-yard line and Dalton tries to run it in. You know, I really think the Cincinnati Bengals should have put this game away a long time ago in the first half, and it shouldn't have been as close as it did. The way the Ravens did of actually coming back and taking the lead in the second half is a semblance of, you know, a winning team, I think, in the long term for the season. Yeah, it was a very bad first half. In fact, I think it's probably the worst half that we'll see the Ravens play for the rest of the year. But I guess at least we got it out of the way early.
Yeah, I hope you're right. So let's break it down, I guess, quarter by quarter. So in the first quarter, Bengals score 6 points on 2 Mike Nugent field goals, a 49-yarder and then a 22-yarder. In the second quarter, 3 more field goals for Nugent. He was just the fantasy stud today if you had Mike Nugent. 3 more field goals, 28-yarder, 46-yarder, and a 38-yarder. So slow development, I guess, for the Ravens offensively, but and they got themselves in some trouble on some 3rd and longs where they were letting up some deep yardage. Seemed like they weren't able to kind of keep up the pace, I felt like, with what the Bengals offense was doing. In particular, the pass rush I thought was really disappointing, but limited it to 15 points. Actually took a lead in this game in the second half, so I guess I tip my cap to what they were able to do defensively in the first half.
It's not like the Bengals did anything remarkable during the first half. A lot of it was just dink and dunks and, you know, just relying on Bernard just to kind of ground and pound. I mean, it was typical AFC North football, so it wasn't that surprising. Again, I'm going to come back to the QB read option on the second series. You know, Andy Dalton is not a running quarterback. I'm not sure exactly what they were trying to cue up with Hugh Jackson, but it was a very bizarre situation. You know, Bernard was having such good luck and like good applicability in the game that I don't understand why they went away from him so early. It just was a very strange game call by the Bengals. And like I said, I think the Bengals should have absolutely dominated here after coming out of that first half. But again, that's why they play the game. You got to put the ball in the red zone. And you know, the Ravens have had that issues in previous years. Maybe the Bengals have the same situation this year.
So going into the second half there, you got I don't know what Gary Kubiak did in the locker room there, but things look to be completely different in the third and fourth quarter.
I'll tell you what he did is he went to Justin Forsett.
Yeah, how about that?
Justin Forsett is complete, you know, surprise. You know, watching Bernard Pierce play earlier in this game, Bernard Pierce was, you know, he was being consistent but making those 3-yard runs, 3 or 4-yard runs, and you're just like, okay, this looks exactly like we've seen before. There really wasn't any zone blocking. I counted like 4 or 5 zone blocking plays in the beginning of the first half, but the Ravens really shied completely away from zone blocking, which really didn't make any sense. You know, they really relied on Flacco and passing more so than they did on the run, and it's odd from a team that is going to have to emphasize the run in order to survive in the AFC North to have Flacco come out here and throw 50 times today.
Right.
But Forsett coming out today was absolutely amazing. I think he showed a lot of physical explosiveness getting off the line. And the one thing that really encourages me is, in 2 weeks when Ray Rice comes back, the way that Forsett moves on there, I think that's a really encouraging sign for Ray Rice to come back too and be that drop-off pass catcher, but also have that explosiveness off the line in a run-blocking zone offense as well.
Yeah, Forsett, I mean, really one of the positive takeaways for me in this game. And honestly, I think we saw it because Bernard Pierce coughed up the ball in the second quarter, right into the John Harbaugh doghouse, and then boom, you have Forsett, 11 carries for 70 yards, averaging almost 6.5 per carry. I mentioned the third quarter, he broke a 13-yard rush. It was a 10-play drive for the Ravens, 82 yards. And just like that, they're right back in the game, 15-7, and he was pretty consistent. I'll be curious to see what the yards after contact were for him. I felt like he was kind of bouncing off defenders a little bit more successfully than Bernard Pierce was, so that was an encouraging sign. He's one of the positive takeaways for me for sure. As we look at the fourth quarter, so I mentioned 15-7 after 3. Fourth quarter, Justin Tucker makes a 38-yard field goal. It's 15-10, and then boom, just like that, Steve Smith. 80-yard pass, completion from Joe Flacco, and a 6-play drive for 92 yards, and the Ravens have their first lead of the game. Unfortunately, it didn't last real long, Scott, because A.J. Green taking it for 77 yards. It's 23-16, and that ends up being your final. So I think we were excited for about 10 seconds there.
And worst of all, it was one of those bobble catches, too. It reminded everyone very similar of the Hail Mary pass that was during last season's game. And, him putting the ball up in the air, I was like, there's no way he's going to catch it again. And sure enough, he comes down with it. I'm like, man, what is up with this guy making bobble catches in Baltimore? It's just unbelievable. So, it was a terrible, way to, give the lead back up again. But there was plenty of time for the offense to go ahead and march down the field and try to tie the game up. And that wasn't the case. Joe Flacco and the offense went back down there and they let a drive down the field. But then Joe got hit with 2 sacks to end the game.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was a really down note for the offensive line, who I thought played a really good game, all things considering. Let's go back to the Steve Smith touchdown pass that we were just talking about. They were able to give him a good enough pocket where Joe was able to step up and go to the left and let Steve Smith go and get open and make that play. So I'm really encouraged by the offensive line play that I saw today. It wasn't the disaster that it was. Now, that being said, ending the game on 2 sacks is pretty disappointing.
Yeah. No, that is. I was encouraged by the offensive line too as well, but yeah, a tough way to end this game. The Steve Smith pass, man, that was really good to see, because this was a guy who, when I was writing the 5 takeaways on Baltimore Sports Report, initially after the first half, I said, man, what a bad debut for this guy, and then he breaks that one, just a nasty stiff arm too. Really, really good to see from Steve Smith, and hopefully that's the type of thing we can see over the next 15 regular season games.
Yeah, that might have been your highlight for the game, with Steve Smith making that great play and that stiff arm. But my low light for the game was just the amount of drop passes by Steve Smith and the rest of the wide receiver corps. I mean, the wide receiver corps outside of our tight ends had an absolutely atrocious game today. Steve Smith got plenty of places, but also Jacoby Jones had an absolutely abysmal day today.
I don't know how he missed that ball.
Yeah, but again, this is nothing that is too surprising for Jacoby Jones, but it'll be interesting to see how often the Ravens are going to target Jacoby Jones as that third wide receiver, or whether they start to work other individuals in, because it doesn't look like Jacoby Jones has the sure hands that he did that one night in Detroit.
And you mentioned that, and it seemed like we get these drops from all the different Ravens receivers, and then boom, Joe goes right back to targeting Dennis Pitta. It's him and Dennis Pitta. 10 catches, 83 yards, averaging 8.3, a long for 23. He was targeted 15 times, which is tied for most with Steve Smith. So, I feel like a couple drop passes and Joe immediately goes back to his guy, which is fine, because I think we've seen that Pitta can be that guy. But it certainly didn't take long for the game plan to kind of shift in that direction. And,
it's fine for Pitta to be that kind of guy. And even Owen Daniels stepped up a little bit, too, in terms of the dink and dunk. But you have to have that deep threat with Joe. You've got to spread out the field. And if we're not going to be able to spread out the field with Torrey Smith, who's the burner on our team, defense is going to figure that out very quickly, and they're going to scrunch it and to basically compact the field. And if we're going to compact the field and take away our home run hitter and Torrey Smith, who is our number 1 wide receiver, the Ravens are going to be in for trouble. So, yes, Torrey Smith did drop balls, but we can't take him out of the game like we did today. And that's really, I think, on Joe Flacco more so than anything else, not having confidence in him.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I gave my highlight, and you gave a low light. What's your highlight from today's game?
I think my highlight actually is that blocked field goal. I think that really showed it wasn't one great play by anybody, it was just great penetration by the special teams. That's really great to see the special teams make a great play like that. So I think that was a really big change of emotion play for the game. So I'm going to give the blocked field goal as my highlight for the game.
I like it. That was a good one. They had a lot of practice getting a blocked field goal. So six opportunities, but I was glad to see them come up with that. Unfortunately, Joe Flacco comes back and throws a pick right after, so that was tough. So you gave your highlight. Mine was the Steve Smith stiff arm. Your low light was the drop passes, and mine has got to be Joe Flacco. 8 seconds left, and actually, this is just brutal. 8 seconds left in the first half. A lot of pressure on Flacco. All he's got to do is drop back, throw the ball in the back of the end zone, set up a nice, easy chip shot field goal, get on the board. Instead, he scrambles, gets sacked, wastes all 8 seconds. The Ravens end up getting nothing. He said after the game, it's the dumbest play I've ever made in football. And watching his career, I think Joe Flacco is absolutely correct in saying that statement. Yes, very, very, very dumb. And kind of summarized the way the first half went for the Ravens, I thought.
Yeah, that was a Browns-esque type play is the best way I can describe it. I think anybody on the field was screaming, saying, throw it away, throw it away, throw it away. I just don't know what Joe was thinking in that play. So at least he realizes it was a dumb play and took some accountability for it. He's right up there with Nick Hundley for me of taking accountability for dumb plays.
How about the quarterback comparison in this one? So you mentioned Flacco, 62 attempts. He went 35 for 62, 345 yards passing, a touchdown, an interception. He was sacked 3 times. 71 rating, you compare that to Andy Dalton, who it seemed like was going to really outperform Flacco based on how he played. I mean, the opening drive alone kind of made you feel that way. But he ended up going 25 for 38, 301 yards, and just 1 touchdown, no interceptions. And he was not sacked once, which, again, I think is a big story I want to get to a little bit later. Not sacked at all was Andy Dalton. So how did you think the two compared to each other?
I just look at the 62 attempts by Joe Flacco, and I just said there's just no way that you could win a game that way. And again, it wasn't in a situation where Flacco had to throw a bunch at the end of the game in order to come back. It was a situation where we basically came out and said, we want to throw the ball today. And, I'll go through the records later this week about when Joe Flacco throws for more than 50 attempts, but I guarantee you that it's probably no higher than a 300 winning percentage. So Joe Flacco cannot throw that many times. He can be throwing 40, 45 times, but we really need to emphasize the run. Justin Forsett and Bernard Pierce really needed to get 15 carries each in order for this team to win this game, and they had a 17 carries total together, and that's not going to happen.
No, you're right. And you mentioned Forsett, 11 carries, 70 yards, did reach the end zone, broke one for 13 yards. Pierce's day was over pretty quick. 6 carries, 14 yards, 2.3 average. His long was for 6. And hey, Joe Flacco with 3 carries as well, including one for a nice first down. He took a vicious hit on the sideline. 3 carries for 7 yards, and you compare that to the Cincinnati Bengals, who had a bit of a more balanced offensive approach. Giovanni Bernard, 14 carries, 48 yards. Jeremy Hill, 4 carries for 19 yards at 4.8 per carry. So a little more balanced attack for the Bengals, and they end up coming up on top in this one.
Yeah, I also thought that the Bernard Hill comparisons too were really interesting because Bernard was that more of that pounding running back, and Hill was again more the Forsett type running back, kind of just being the speed. So the Bengals definitely did a good job with that, but also they used Bernard very well in terms of dinking and dumping. So again, Bernard ended up with 6 receptions for 62 yards as well. Whereas, you look at your running backs that are for the Ravens, and you had Justin Forsett with 5 receptions for 14 yards. That's pretty ugly in terms of, it's just basically saving a play, and that's not doing anything for the Ravens.
Yeah. Bernard, like you mentioned, 6 carries for 62 yards, and A.J. Green was the guy that broke everybody's hearts here in Baltimore. 6 receptions, 131 yards, and 77 of them came on that big touchdown. Shockey Brown strikes again. So Steve Smith had 7 catches for 118 yards. Of course, 80 of those came on one play, too. We mentioned Dennis Pitta, who had 10 for 83. Torrey Smith, 3 for 50. So it's so hard to look at A.J. Green's numbers and just not be completely heartbroken by that big play.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the Ravens did a pretty decent job of covering him today. There was 2 plays that I really think emphasized it. He had a 30-yard play, and then again he had the 77-yard play. But overall, I think the Ravens did a great coverage job on A.J. Green. Coming back to that big play with the 77 yards, you had Shockey Brown on him. You cannot have Shockey Brown on A.J. Green. I'm sorry,
No.
that's not acceptable.
You're gonna lose.
The other thing, which was, even with Shockey Brown on him, Matt Elam came over that play very late. And I just don't understand that. Earlier in the game, the safeties were giving a lot of assistance to Shockey Brown. And I don't understand how, if A.J. Green gets that open on Shockey Brown, how Matt Elam isn't right there. When that ball is deflected, Matt Elam has to be right there to knock that ball down and not allow A.J. Green to catch it on a bobble.
Yeah, definitely. So any other offensive takeaways for you in this one, Scott?
No, not really. Honestly, it was a really poor offensive game. It was interesting to see them use the 2 tight ends somewhat effectively with Pitta and Owen Daniels later in the third quarter.
Right.
But honestly, I really think the Ravens need to focus on going back and emphasizing the run game. Yes, I realize Ray Rice is not in there, but you need to emphasize why you brought Gary Kubiak in here, and that is for zone blocking in terms of your run offense, and it just didn't seem like the Ravens wanted to emphasize that heavily today. And I don't quite know why. I don't know why they didn't come back and keep trying to emphasize it. I will say, though, in the first half with Vontaze Burfict in there, it did seem like he was shutting it down, and after he left, the run offense seemed to pick up. So maybe they just didn't feel like they could get anything on Vontaze Burfict with that rushing offense.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Defensively, I was really disappointed in the pass rush. I alluded to it a little bit earlier with you. The secondary obviously is the weakness of this defense, and they're going to have to put pressure up front. It just didn't seem like they could do it. Was Haloti not playing at all? I mean, I know he had a pass deflection, but he finished with 2 total tackles. He's going to have to be a guy who makes his presence known up there up front, and just did not see it today.
I totally agree with you. I mean, right now he's getting his cash for nothing and doing his Royal Farms commercial. So
yeah. That's a line of the. We should just end the show right now. That's the line of the day. Really, really disappointing to see that. Terrell Suggs had 5 tackles, 2 solo. Nothing really sticks out for Suggs as far as I'm concerned in this one. I don't know. No real big highlights for me. So I don't know. What'd you think of how the secondary performed, though?
I think the secondary did pretty decent. Besides that Shockey Brown play, I think that the secondaries did all right. I think you're right. I think it comes back to rushing the quarterback, and we really did a poor job of that overall. I didn't hear Doomerville's name called at all during the game, which is very concerning.
One tackle.
Yes. So when you have Suggs and Doomerville basically not putting any pass rush on them, that's a big concern again. When you have Doomerville, Nada, and Suggs, all high-priced players not making an impact, that's going to come back to hurt you. Coming back to the secondary, I'm surprised that they got through everything okay. Coming into this game with only 3 cornerbacks, I'm shocked that they got to this game. When Cox was cut earlier this week, I was like, that means Webb is perfectly fine.
Right.
So when Webb was put as inactive, I was just like, what? How does that make any sense?
Yeah, that was a bit of a head scratcher this morning. As far as special teams go, any takeaways from special teams?
I'm going to point out the first play of the game, which was an unnecessary roughness on the first kickoff, pushing your offense back to 11 yards. You got to be smarter than that. So someone just ended up in John Harbaugh's doghouse. The other one I want to focus on was the Pac-Man Jones play that brought them up into the Ravens side of the field in the first quarter, and it was when he juked the play, and the entire special teams stopped completely. You don't stop. That's a big issue. Everyone stopped on that line saying, "Oh my gosh, where's it going to go?" You have to keep running down the field and adjust your play of, okay, I'm going to keep running at him, and I'm going to adjust the way I'm going towards him. Just because he stops, that's actually good for me because that means he doesn't have as much acceleration, which is going to make it easier for him to tackle. And that's the reason why he was able to make that great play is because he was able to accelerate a lot quicker than anybody else in that special teams.
Justin Tucker, 1 for 2, attempted a 55-yard field goal in the second quarter. What do you think about that decision?
I don't get that at all. I don't understand why you don't pin them back and say, good luck trying to get out of the 10-yard line, and we'll try to get you to come back. But again, it's an AFC North game. It's all about field possession, and I just don't understand that play at all.
Any coaching takeaways for you in this one?
There was a play during the fourth quarter, and it really wasn't a coach. It was more on Flacco again, that there was an incomplete pass, and they were on this Bengals side of the field, and they basically had to waste a timeout. It didn't come back to burn the Ravens, but it easily could have come back and burned them. So, again, that's just kind of the heads-up play that, waste of timeouts is a big thing for the Ravens, and hopefully that'll be something that they bring up in video and say, what the heck were we thinking here? Why didn't we get back to the line and call the next play?
No doubt. Bottom line takeaway for you as we wrap things up on Postgame Live.
Thank God there's another football game in like 4 days, because honestly, no one wants to listen to sports radio or about the depressing articles that are going to be occurring. That being said, the Ravens have to win this next game. They can't go 0-2 in the division. If the Ravens go 0-2 into this division, you can expect the Orioles bandwagon to get mighty big during October.
Yeah, you're definitely right about that. And they were already talking about that. Bill Cowher brought it up in halftime. He was already counting the Ravens as 0-1. So gotta win on Thursday. For me, I really want to see a more balanced attack in week 2. Joe Flacco can't throw 62 times like you mentioned. I'll be curious to see what they do. Is Forsett going to be the primary guy? Is Pierce going to be in the doghouse permanently? What can they expect to get out of Forsett against the Steelers? So that's going to be a big thing to look forward to in a few days for me. So, well, Scott, it's been a pleasure. I know Bird's Eye View is coming up this week. Anything to pump? What are you guys working on?
I'm going to sit down tonight after looking at probably a losing box score for the Ravens and a losing box score for the Orioles and figure that out. But what I'm actually promising to do this year for the Ravens is I'm actually going to try to apply some of that sabermetric knowledge that I've been using in baseball to a little bit of football. So I'm going to go in there and try to write a few articles regarding a few things that we might not just see in the box score, but how effective certain plays are and what the Ravens should be focusing on in future games.
Love it. Well, I'm really looking forward to checking that out. And for now, the thing I'll plug is my 5 real quick thoughts on the Ravens loss in Week 1. And I tried to make it a little bit light, a little bit humorous. It's only 1 week, so check that out right now on BaltimoreSportsReport.com. So, Scott, thanks so much for joining me.
It was a pleasure.
And we'll be back next week with another Postgame Live.